There's this strange thing about growing up. Nobody warns you how quickly time slips away. You always think you have more days to visit, more moments to share, more chances to say the things that matter. But life has a way of moving faster than we expect. And sometimes, it isn't until those moments are behind us that we realize what we've been leaving behind all along. This is my story. A daughter who thought she had endless time. A daughter who didn't understand how much those everyday moments, the little things, would come to mean. I never saw it coming, how life would change, until I looked back and realized I'd already missed so much. It's funny looking back now, how I thought the mess we left everywhere was just that, a mess. My brother and I made absolute chaos out of the house. Legos buried so deep in the carpet they became part of the floor. Crayon murals on the walls and stuffed animals somehow ending up in the fridge. And Dad? Oh, he tried his best to keep up, but we drove him a little crazy. He liked golf, though if I'm honest, I don't think golf liked him back. I still remember the way he'd grumble every time the ball landed in the rough, followed by that determined look on his face like this time he was going to get it right. But fishing? That was his real escape. It was Dad's way of finding silence. Just him, the water, and the hum of nature far away from our chaos. Inside the house, though, forget about silence. It was pure, delightful madness. And Dad? He was the center of it all, our personal tickle monster. He loved sneaking up on us, fingers poised like claws, growling, "I'm gonna get you!" We'd shriek and try to escape, but it never worked. He'd catch us and tickle us until we were crying with laughter, squirming on the floor, begging him to stop. But he wouldn't. Not until we could barely breathe from laughing so hard. Then there were moments like the night he stepped on one of my brother's action figures. He howled in pain, hopping around on one foot while muttering things that were definitely not meant for little ears. We laughed so hard we couldn't stand, rolling around on the floor. And Dad? He tried to act mad, but he couldn't hide his smile. Back then, it felt like just another ordinary evening in our wonderfully messy life. But now, I'd give anything to hear that laugh again, the one Dad did when he knew he was supposed to be annoyed, but he just couldn't help himself. Dad wasn't the kind of parent who packed our lunches. That was Mom's thing. She made sure our sandwiches were cut just the way we liked, with little snacks tucked into the corners of our lunch boxes. But Dad? He was the one who drove us to school without fail every single morning. It didn't matter if it was raining, snowing, or if the sun hadn't even come up yet. He was always there, sitting behind the wheel, sipping his coffee, ready to take us wherever we needed to go. There were no complaints, just a quiet presence, dependable and steady. Those car rides are etched into my memory now. I remember the way he'd hum along to the radio, sometimes catching us off guard by belting out a line from a song we hated. We'd roll our eyes, laugh, and tell him he was embarrassing. But secretly, we loved it. And then there were the mornings he'd say nothing at all, just driving along while my brother and I argued over who would get to pick the music. He never interrupted, just kept driving, always patient, as if giving us those small moments to be kids was more important than getting to school on time. It's funny, looking back, how much I took it all for granted. I never realized how much effort it took to get up early every single day, to sit through traffic, to be on call for us, no matter what. I thought it was just what Dad's did. I didn't know then how those little moments were his way of showing love, his way of saying, "I'll always be here, no matter what." Now I realize those drives were more than just transportation. They were his way of being close to us, even as we grew older and drifted into our own worlds. It didn't happen overnight, but the change was real. As we grew older, my brother and I stopped asking Dad to play with us. The toys disappeared, bit by bit. We got our own rooms and started keeping the doors closed, the house got quieter. And I know, that silence hurt Dad more than he let on. He'd still knock sometimes, asking if we wanted to watch a movie or go grab ice cream. And I'd always have an excuse. I have homework, Dad. Or, I promised my friends I'd call them. He'd smile, say, "Okay, princess, maybe next time," and walk away like it didn't matter. But I know now it did. It wasn't that I didn't love him. I just thought he'd always be there, waiting. I thought there'd always be time to do all the things he wanted to do together. I thought we'd always have more next times. But we didn't. I'll never forget the day I left for university. Dad packed the car with all my things, making sure everything fit perfectly. He even triple-checked my list to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. When it was finally time to leave, he hugged me, tighter and longer than usual. I remember thinking it was just a little over the top. "Come on, Dad," I said, half laughing. "It's not like I'm going to Mars." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I know," he said quietly. I'm going to miss you, that's all." I didn't really understand what he meant. Not then. I was too busy thinking about all the new adventures waiting for me. I didn't realize that this wasn't just goodbye for the day. It was the start of a quieter, emptier home. I wish I had hugged him a little longer. I wish I had told him that I'd miss him too. As the years passed, my calls became less frequent. Life got busy. Between building a career, raising a family of my own, and juggling 1,000 responsibilities, it felt like there was never enough time. Dad understood. He always understood. He'd say, "I know you're busy, sweetheart. I'm just glad you called." And every time I hung up, I'd tell myself I'd visit soon. But soon never felt urgent enough. And then came the day that shook me to my core. I called him like usual, and when he picked up, there was a long pause. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. I laughed nervously. "Dad, it's me. It's your daughter." He was quiet for a moment, then chuckled, embarrassed. "Of course. Sorry, princess, I've just got a lot on my mind." But I knew. In that moment, I knew that something was slipping away, something I'd never be able to get back. His mind, the one filled with all those beautiful, messy memories of us, was beginning to fade. That moment broke me. All the times I thought I was too busy to call or visit came rushing back in waves of guilt. I kept thinking about all the times he wanted to talk, and I brushed him off. All the next times I promised, believing we had forever. But forever isn't real. Now, when I visit him, he still smiles and calls me his princess. But I can see the gaps, memories slipping through the cracks of his mind. And it aches in a way I wasn't prepared for. If I could go back, I'd do things differently. I'd answer every call. I'd visit more often. I'd sit with him, watch his old shows, and ask him to tell me those stories I thought I'd heard too many times. I'd give anything for just one more chaotic day. One more hug. One more, "I love you, princess." So, if you're listening to this, and your parents are still here, still able to recognize your voice, don't wait. Don't wait for later, because life has a way of slipping through your fingers while you're not paying attention. Dad is still with us, but things are changing. His memory drifts, sometimes gently, like a tide pulling away. He still knows who I am, calls me his little princess, just like he always has. But there are moments now when he forgets where I live or asks if we went fishing recently, even though it's been years. those small lapses hit harder than I ever thought they could. They remind me that, little by little, we're losing pieces of the man who raised us. It's not too late, but the clock is ticking, and that's what scares me most. It scares me that one day he might not remember being the tickle monster, or how we laughed until we couldn't breathe. It scares me that the things he gave us, the love, the stories, the quiet moments fishing, might fade from his mind, even though they live so clearly in mine. This is why I need to tell you, don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait until life slows down, because it won't. Now is the time to call them, visit them, listen to those stories again, even if you've heard them 100 times. Because life is made of little moments, and those little moments won't wait. And if you wait too long, you might find yourself sitting in the quiet, surrounded by the echoes of what was, wishing for just one more time, just one more fishing trip, just one more round of golf, just one more night curled up on the couch, laughing until you cried at the silly stories and tickle attacks. Just one more chance to say, I love you. Because one day, the house will be quiet, and the silence won't be peaceful. It'll just feel lonely. And when that day comes, you'd give anything to have it all back again. Just one more time.